presenting about globalizing the classroom through active learning. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming. As the introduction said, I'm at JO University, but I also teach at a few other places. And the approaches I've developed here, or I'm going to show you today, were not developed at KO. They were developed at intermediate or much lower level universities and with much lower level students. So I'd like you to keep your mind open towards those. What I'm talking about today is not an activity, but rather an approach to how we use the 90 minutes that we're allotted with our students every day, and how we can maybe make the best use of that. When I was an undergrad, I submitted a paper, and when I got it back, I forget what B or C, single comment on the front was long on description, short on analysis. And at the time, I thought, of course it's short on analysis. I have no idea what I'm talking about here. But 30 years down the road, I thought there might be something we can glean from that to improve our classroom experience for our students. So active learning, or the flipped classroom, and moving towards a more globalized classroom is my theme here. What is a globalized classroom? Well, after 30 years of teaching in Japan, I think it is, my answer for the purposes of this presentation is it's less of a traditional Japanese classroom. It is not student-centered. It is not teacher-centered. It is not memorization-oriented. It is not entirely or overly focused on testing. But it is more about bringing the classroom alive, and it is also focused on two-way communication in the classroom space as opposed to one-way as a lecture. So what is active learning? There is no set definition, but for the purposes of my discussion today, as a teacher, it focuses on what the students are going to do in the 90 minutes, as opposed to what I'm going to teach them. Now, what they do in classroom, what I have them do, or what I try to have them do, of course, is focused on what I would teach them, but instead of lecturing them on what they need to know, right? I'm giving them activities or opportunities to interact with each other and with me to demonstrate whether they know or can do what I want them to. Taken from my paper as an undergrad, it favors analysis over description. Right? It encourages and rewards participation in class, right? Rather than just attendance. In fact, in my classes, I get absolutely nothing for attendance, and I tell students that at the beginning of the term. And it is student-focused rather than teacher-focused. Now, let me ask you, how many people have heard of active learning or the flipped classroom? Most people. How many people would say you are using the flipped classroom or active learning in some form of your teaching? Most people are. All right, so I'm speaking to the converted already. How many people are language teachers? Oh, all right. I think we have a distinct advantage being language teachers. We are trained and taught to use a form of the flipped classroom. However, it does present some challenges with all Japanese students, apparently, especially if they are low level and or of low motivation. Why is it important? Okay. Well, I think as a teacher of English in the first year of university, I'm really asking myself, am I teaching English? I mean, one of the highest level communicative textbooks is at about junior high school, 3rd grade level. So if they didn't learn it being explained in Japanese 3 years ago, are they going to learn it from me when I explain or lecture about it? You know, there are teachers that say, well, maybe if I just explain it one more time. I don't think so, right? They need to stand up and start using it. So there's a focus on content use over memorization, all right? it's about the students and it's about student speaking. So the focus here is on them producing in class rather than them passively listening, especially to me. Listening to other students is okay. And it's about the coming wave of online learning opportunities that are going to replace us if we continue to stand up front and lecture. All right? It's coming. It's already here in some spaces. All right? So if you don't want to be a dinosaur, like I don't, this is something to think about. Here are some examples. A MOOC, massive open online course set up and published by Tokyo University, talks about let's put an end to lecture-style teaching. This was done in Japanese primarily for Japanese teachers. I did a bit of the course. It was difficult to follow, but they were trying to convert conventional Japanese instructors to this more of a flipped classroom approach. Online sites like edX, at last count, have 1,500 free classes from Ivy League schools on almost every topic. The only thing is, they are one way. The videos are recorded, they have subtitles if you need them, there are quizzes, there are tests, there are even online submissions of essays, and they're starting to build in certificate programs and even degree programs. If you're lecturing to your students in a one-way environment, you are a prime candidate we are going to be replaced by these kinds of classes. Right? So the active learning environment says, and let me jump to one more example. This is another Tokyo University conference held just a couple months ago on diversifying and flipping the classroom to make it a more open, interactive space. So I think my opinion on it is that technology is going to replace lecture-style teaching, if it hasn't already. In fact, there was a movement in the West to start replacing middle-level professors with, the MOOC offered by Princeton or Harvard, right? The administration thought, why should we have, this guy who's using the textbook from Harvard to teach his economics class? Why don't we just show the MOOC and then convert the class into, what a TA would do? They put the kibosh on it only because the professors upped and wouldn't go along with it, all right? But I think, from a teaching, if we're focused on what's best for the students, I don't see why you wouldn't use that. This needs to be a wake-up call for the way that we teach. I put this slide in there, but now I can't remember why, so there it is. So I'm going to talk about some of the keys. I didn't expect everybody to be a language teacher here, so I wanted to open up some facets or ways that teachers teaching content or even other courses could possibly flip their classroom. Right? Student-centered activities are a very important part of this. As language teachers, you know this, right? But having the students know exactly what they have to do and how long they have to do it is a very important part of it. I like to focus on critical thinking rather than memorization. Right? We have a lot of latitude in terms of the content or textbooks that we choose, or if the textbooks are set, how we approach them. I feel it's much better to look at an issue and ask students to give their opinion on it than to give them Jack and Jill went up the hill and then say, who went up the hill, all right? So it's a movement away from memorizing and checking right or wrong towards, this set of questions in the world that don't have an answer yet. And finally, transparency. Transparency is a big buzzword these days. Research shows that it helps students better engage, it improves their motivation, and it improves learning outcomes, because students know exactly what to expect, and the results of their tests or other evaluations are open and clear to them. And finally, I add this in as something for Japan. The flipped classroom and active learning is very unfamiliar to many Japanese students. In fact, to a lot of Japanese educators, they can't even spell it. Right? They have no idea what it is. So getting your class to flip successfully can be a tall order. Now, most first year and second year Japanese university students have been taught passively for at least 6 years, maybe more, in English class, right? They've been called on, to stand up and give a one-word answer. It's not easy to get them to change, all right? And so my biggest point is that you need to change your assessment system and your grading towards participation and the way you do it, all right? If you think about the percentage of North Americans that work on salary versus on commission, look at the jobs where a commission pay scale is used. Why is it used? Well, because the average North American doesn't see getting up and getting on the phone or knocking on doors all day long as something they will do for simply a salary, right? They need to be motivated. So people that are in sales or in trading or those kinds of jobs, the payment systems change in order to motivate them to do something different, to motivate them to do something that is somewhat abnormal vis-a-vis what most people do. What I'm talking about here is an assessment system that is similarly changed in order to encourage and reward students to actively engage in the classroom. So, I meant to say at the beginning, there will be time for questions at the end, but I welcome questions to clarify at any time while I'm talking here, so just raise your hand. So I've gone over the main areas or keys to flipping your classroom here in Japan. Next, I want to show you what I do. One way to do that, all right, and give you some examples. When I start every class, I start with about 10 slides of front matter, right? And I review these every single class because students need to be reminded the flipped classroom is different. It's not only different from the 6 years of English they did before, but it's different from the other 9 classes they're doing at Keio, right? Anecdotal evidence from my students shows that no other classes have the flipped classroom yet, which means they come in, they sit right in the back, they take notes, or they don't take notes, and then the final exam is 60%, and they cruise on by. This front matter, this reminder, every single class, I feel is necessary and effective in getting them to change their behavior. So I start with a title page of sorts, right here. This kind of sets the brand for the class, also gives my contact information. And then the very next slide, I think, is the most important one. It speaks to transparency, and it helps orient the students to where they are in the process of this class. So it typically begins by reminding them, we're in class 7, and we're doing this topic, and last week we did a different topic, and next week we will be moving forward. It reminds them how much time they've got left before the end of the term, and what the end of the term assessment will be. In this case, I want students to produce language, at the level they can. It could be high at Keio, it's much, much lower at some of the other schools, right? But if you want students to produce, but you don't have an assessment system that encourages and rewards that, I think your results are going to be mixed. So what I've done here is a 40-60 split, where the final exam, there's no exam at all. They are going to stand up and give 10-minute presentations, right? And so the flipped classroom and participation in it feeds into practice for this speech act that will be 40% of their grade. However, the biggest part of their grade is participation at 60%. Now, a lot of people say that's crazy, you can't do that. Yeah, you can. You can do it. And on the first day, students go nuts and they don't understand it, right? What I use in terms of participation, transparency, and a discrete system, and this is it. I've got a listing here, it's just a attendance list, which I make a copy, right? And every speech act that students produce of their own volition gets them 1%. So basically, any question that's asked, any answer that's given, any comment that's made to me or to other students in a whole classroom environment is marked down here. And in other instances where they have a chance to come up front in front of everybody, they get 2%, all right? And it's kept right here. When students come in before class, it's sitting there, they come in and they have a look. When they leave class, they come back up to check how far they are towards the 60 minutes.
So you keep the record.
Yes.
So how many students do you have in that class?
Anywhere from 15 to 35.
So it's manageable for you to keep track of who said wanting to make that.
It is challenging. It is challenging
Right.
sometimes. Like, especially in the first 5 classes, you know, Mariko, where are you, Mariko, what's your family name? Or, you know, I call her Taro, and everybody laughs, so I'm Mariko. And, but by about the 5th or 6th class, you get it. As soon as you see the student's hand go up, you know, she's down here. And I'm often listening to their answer while I'm giving them their point. A couple of teachers listen. Did you have a question?
Yes,
Yeah.
well, I'll let you first. So I just have a question. When you say you give students participation points, when they say something or ask a question or do something in front of the class, what happens if they do an activity where they're not speaking or they're not asking questions? How do you give participation points for that? So it's like a silent activity, like reading or listening activity.
They don't get any.
Also, only get points if they only speak alone.
Right. Yes. So before we do a whole class speaking activity, they would have 2 or 3 minutes to discuss something. There are no participation points given for that. But I will be walking around saying, you know, like, discuss your weekend. Maybe we're doing the past tense. Discuss last weekend. If you have questions, you can ask me. I will be walking around. Some students, you know.
How do you distinguish between like purposeful output and just words? So if a student is constantly shouting out, nice, nice, nice in class.
So first of all, they need to put their hand up.
Yeah.
So yeah, and the guy goes, nice. They need to make a full sentence. SVO, that's the bottom line. They do not need to speak perfectly, but a full sentence is the minimum. Good questions. All right. So what I get is 2 minutes. Yeah. So what I get is for every opportunity to produce language or to answer a question, I get a sea of hands up. And, you know, this is what is produced. Okay? And I vary the activities or, you know, what they need to do or say in class in order to, you know, keep them challenged and keep them on track to getting 60%. So let me just wrap up quickly. Time flies when you're having fun. Other things here, behavioral disruption problems, virtually 0 in 3 years. I have no rules in my class except this. You can sleep, you can drink, you can eat, you can use your phone, you can bring a computer, you can come late, you can leave early, you can be absent. I don't even care if you come, right? You need to speak 60 times and it's on you. And you know what everyone says? You'll have pandemonium. You don't. You have students focused, okay? And furthermore, people say there's no panacea, but you know what? I would say this is it. There's a lot less work for me as a teacher because they're doing all the work. And as you asked about giving these points, the most work I have is trying to keep up with giving them all the points because the activities are structured, the topic changes every time. They know what they're going to do. They just need to change the topic every week. And they are driving the class. And this is not just KO when the students are high level. This is low-level students where it's, Kobo Yondense. So again, this is a way to reduce your student teaching load, increase participation, and have a more exciting, fun class, and get the students doing what they need to do, which is to globalize their thinking, to look at the classroom as an interactive space, not a sleeping space, and prepare for the world ahead. Thank you. Any other questions?
Thanks so much for that. I think it's fascinating the approach you're taking, and I think it's definitely something the Japanese students need. And I'm most interested in how you get from your participation sheet that you have there to your final grades, or are you under pressure to produce a bell curve of grades? Because I'd imagine simply transferring it, you might just have a really great class, really bad class, or how to make the smoothness of things,
I am not under pressure to bell any grades. I do fail students. I tell them, if you failed yourself. I didn't fail you. The university at which I developed this system pressured me to bell and not fail anybody, so I left. I got hired at KO because of this system. So,
and how do your final grades usually look? Do you have like half the class fantastic, half terrible, or no balance?
No, you know what? You tend to get, it's tough to give people a C, really. A lot of classes, nobody fails, and they're all S and A level, but you got to distinguish them somehow. So yeah, that would be a big challenge.
Yeah, we have tried something similar. So have you considered, this is just a question, have you considered, as opposed to, it seemed very labor intensive to check who's participating, what I've opted for is perhaps negative is a demerit system, the people that don't participate. And so what my labor intensity goes down because I'm able to say, okay, this person's not, this person is, but most of them are. And what I had a problem was I was so focused on that, I wasn't getting any feedback. And I wonder how you're managing feedback to your students, or is it group, individual, is it a mix?
Sure, that's a good question. I mean, this is not the only way. This is one way to reflect an assessment system that heavily values participation at 60% and is fully transparent and is discrete. It's not just, oh, you guys seem to be participating there in the back, It's, Mariko spoke, you asked a question, you came up here, right? So there may be room for improvement.
Well, feedback, I had a problem myself giving feedback.
Here's my thing on feedback. It's less about you made a mistake, and it's more about in the activity, did she understand your opinion? Because I've got them interacting with each other in a full classroom thing. If I don't understand what he said, but she did, focus of the class is supposed to be on the students. So sometimes I will stop correcting, and they seem to get it.
But when I say feedback, I don't mean correcting mistakes necessarily. Like it's positive reinforcement, that was well done, kind of thing. So
yeah, I'll say that. Good. Jack, good point, excellent point. There. Does anyone want to respond to Jack? While I'm giving,
So in a follow-up, I found that when I started with a demerit system, as I got into the 8th and 9th and 10th classes, I didn't need the clipboard anymore.
Exactly.
So that was, you set them in the beginning, and then all of a sudden their behavior seems to adjust, and then you use it less and less.
Exactly. This is a system that hopefully puts itself out of business. And that's the goal.
Yes. During the assessment period, I saw that you had 3 weeks where students are doing presentations.
Yeah.
And is this a facet of the assessment also valid? So are they encouraged to make comments and ask questions during that presentation period?
For the audience.
Yes.
So the audience can still try to get their 60% while other students present.
And that's through commenting on the presentations.
Yes, right? And that forces the presenters to have an interactive presentation, because if they just read for 10 minutes, nobody has a chance to ask questions, right? So Sorry.
I'm just wondering, when they give their presentations at the end of the term, you find any of the interactions in the classroom, maybe fellow students are asking questions, you find it authentic? Do they feel motivated to actually ask the questions, or is it just, again, they're just asking because they want to get a point?
Yeah, it's mostly motivated and authentic, but occasionally you do get that kind of cheating. You know what ends up happening? I don't have to put my foot down. The other students will jump on, jump on and put it through the mill. So the thing tends to run itself. Most part. Yes.
Yeah, we kind of just read some of our courses, elective courses at my university, and I'm doing something very similar in one of my classes, and I have found that the students are far more motivated. But I have 2 students who, despite kind of going over the rules of participation class, if you don't talk, you don't pass, are still very unwilling to be part of everything.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where the other students also noticing it and they're kind of like, what are you doing? But they themselves want to participate. How do you handle that kind of?
What week are you in? Week 7? Week 8?
In 8, yeah.
I've had students sit and say nothing until this point, or week 9. Because at the beginning of every class, I said, I just want to remind you, it's not about coming and singing, it's about speaking. The top student has 54 so far, the bottom student has 3. So even if your final exam, if your presentation is perfect, 40 plus 3, you're coming back next year. I have no problem with that. I love all my students. If you come back next year, love to see you next year. You gotta ask yourself, will your parents love it? So you can speak 60 times this year, or you can do it next year. It's your choice. And I find they get on the bandwagon, and those students that were holding out, sitting there, they kept reading textbook, kept making notes. Said, what do you do? You don't get any points for making notes. All of a sudden, they go nuts and they get on board.
Just a quick question, going back to participation when students speak. Do you have any problems with students if they know they're only going to get participation points for speaking? If you're doing any of the activities like listening, or reading, or writing, do they still feel as motivated to really engage in that task if they know there's an opportunity to get participation points from it?
Well, this speaks to the flipped classroom, and I think attempting to use the 90 minutes in the production of language or knowledge and interaction. So I relegate reading, writing, watching movies, or using games to outside class activities. They form the basis of preparation so that you can participate in class, and I try to link them as best I can.
So your class is kind of like speaking focused, conversation focused
Yes.
class? Oh.
Yeah. Even if it's a writing class, it's the class time is speaking about the writing. In my opinion.
Sorry. You just mentioned that week 6 or week 7 we're in now, and then one student's already got 54 points,
Yeah.
and you've got students got 3 points.
Yeah.
So 54, if that student speaks 6 more times in class, he's got 60, he'll pass the class.
Right.
So he or she may not turn up for the rest of the class, but it's his choice. And
Yeah.
but in the past, have you had those kind of students still show up to class because they just stop coming here?
Not only do they show up to class, they keep getting and participating, getting more points, even though they're told you can only get 60. Yeah. You get the odd one that stops coming, but in general, it's positive. And by the way, the top students usually get 60 after about 5 classes because they realize it's not about being perfect, it's about participating. And they're not always the best speakers either. Okay. Thank you for your time and your questions.